Welcome to What We Really Want, Conversations About Connection, brought to you by Awaken. We're a gospel-based 12-step recovery community, and we're dedicated to helping people live the lives they were created for. So settle in and get ready for a great conversation. Let's talk about what we really want.
Welcome back. This is episode 2, and we are picking right up from where we left off in our conversation last time. I'm Greg Oliver, the director of Awaken. Last time you heard me share a little bit of my story along with my wife, Stacey, sharing hers. Today you get to hear our assistant director, Bobby West, share his experience and what led him to recovery and to being a part of Awaken. And then we're going to spend the last part of the episode today talking about why this topic of helping people discover what they really want is so important and why we think it's worth doing a podcast about. So without further ado, I'm going to take us right back to Bobby sharing his story. We're so glad you're here. All right, 2 down, 1 to go.
Bobby's up.
Yeah,
Your turn.
Bobby's up.
My turn.
Bobby and I met in 2010, and I'll let you tell that part of the story. But
All right.
yeah, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. So I grew up here in Birmingham, Alabama, and I was the kid that was in church all the time. My parents would take me there. I was very active. I was there, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday nights, and anything in between that ever came up. And very active in the youth group, and became a Christian when I was 7, and we were walking the aisle, and really believed it all. Was trusting that Jesus was my Savior, that my sins were forgiven, and started to grow as a believer. Started to my desires to know Him, to know the Bible, to pray. All that was growing, and yet I still, as a young. Especially once I got into kind of middle school, just started to have a lot of insecurities. I was just had kind of a desperation to fit in, to be cool, and for me, once I discovered masturbation, that really became a drug. I was like, wow, this feels amazing. This is something that I want more of, and yet at the same time, there was a shame that I felt about it. No one really ever talked to me about it, but yet there was still. I just kind of felt a shame that this was not something I should be doing, and so I kept it hidden. I never talked to anybody about it, and so that pattern continued. Once I got to high school, kind of started dating, and I still had to keep this image. I had to keep this image that that I was the good Christian, guy. I was the looked to as a leader in the youth group, and so I kind of had to portray this image. But yet, there was also a part of me that was like, okay, well, if I can get away with stuff and not get caught, then I was going to do it. And so I kind of became like what I would call like a covert rebel. If I could not get caught by it, then everything was good. And so I had this constant fear that I would get found out, like things I would do.
Ooh, I know that fear.
Yeah. So, and it wasn't just with the masturbation, but that was part of it. And, I can remember just being at school and just having this fear that somehow people knew that I was masturbating. Even though there was no way that they would have, but just kind of carrying that fear around with me. So, went to college. When I was in college, it was really the first time that I began to hear other guys talk about it. I just thought I was alone, thought I was just kind of like a freak. But once I started hearing about other guys sharing a little bit, that did bring me comfort. I was like, okay, wow, I'm not the only person that struggles with this. But the culture that we kind of had in when I was in college in this ministry I was involved with was, it was very much a kind of a behavior modification. If anybody ever confessed anything, it was, what do we got to do to get you to stop doing this? And just for as an example, I remember my freshman year, I was in a little small group, and the leader had said if anybody confessed to masturbating or looking at pornography, we were going to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning and go run, like the whole group. And so that happened one time, and then I was like, yeah, I'm never doing this again. And not just for me, but I was like, I don't want to make everybody else have to get up and run too. So, I know the intention was good. The intention was, let's be honest and let's fix this problem. But the impact just caused me to just keep it hidden more. Just be like, nope, I can't confess this. And so that's kind of how I was in college. I ended up right after college, I went overseas to Asia with a Christian organization, doing ministry over there, and that was one of the best years actually, as far as this particular struggle, because I was so afraid, because I was told that the country and the school that I was at would monitor the internet, and so went a year without really struggling very much, but I came home, started going to seminary, and so just to age me, I graduated from college in 2000, came home from Asia in 2001, and this was when high-speed internet was really, the mainstream now. I got a computer. I was in an apartment with a couple other guys, but up until that point, most of my acting out was with masturbation or just magazines, things like that, like images, or just whatever I could find on cable TV. And now a whole world was opened up to me that I didn't know existed before, just with the internet, with videos, kind of harder core stuff. And here I am preparing to be in the ministry, and this is getting worse. And, my understanding of sanctification was always that after I became a Christian, I was supposed to just continually become more like Christ. I was supposed to be growing, and it was just a line, like a upward diagonal line towards God, that I was supposed to be more and more like Christ. And yet this problem seemed to be getting worse and worse. There were lots of other areas in my life where I was actually growing. My heart was changing, and I was becoming more like Christ. And
isn't that just super frustrating?
Yeah.
To have the both and going on. It's like, if the growth over here is legitimate, then how in the world, can I not get a handle on this other thing?
Yeah, very much so. Because, I would always pray for that, the fruit of the Spirit of self-control. And there was lots of areas where I had a lot of discipline in my life. I mean, I could wake up and every morning, get in the Word and break down Scripture and study it, and then I would spend, I could spend an hour in prayer any given day, and that was stuff that was easy for me, memorizing Scripture. I could do all these things, and yet this one area was an area that I just struggled to have self-control in. And I didn't understand it. And so I really, because of this one area, I really viewed myself as a guy that just didn't have discipline and didn't have self-control. So, and also there was just that fear. Now that I'm in seminary and I'm preparing for the ministry, there was just this fear that, no church would ever hire me, no missions organization or other Christian organization would let me go with them if they knew exactly what I was doing. And so I became really good at acting or kind of portraying that I was being open and honest. Like I would always be one of the first guys if I was meeting with somebody like in a small group or whatever it was, just to say, yeah, I struggled with lust. But I would never really reveal just how deep it was and how exactly, what I was doing. So, I got married in 2003 and really thought, okay, this is it. Like this is gonna at least give me an outlet to a sexual outlet that was really just going to take that edge away. Because in my mind, I just thought this problem was I just had a sex drive that was really high. Like a hyper sex drive that that God had given me, and I had to keep it under control until I got married. And then once I got married, it's like, all right, this is it. I can enjoy this gift that God had given me.
So there's a belief, what I really want is God blessed, guilt-free sex.
Oh yeah.
That's what it didn't go deeper than that.
Right. Oh yeah, very much so. That I get married and things were good for a couple months. And as difficulties and frustrations came into marriage, this problem, going back to pornography and masturbation slowly came back into it. And I still remember the very first time I ever did it after I was married, and just the shame and guilt that I felt, where I was like, how could I be doing this now? It's like I have this outlet. Like, why is this still happening? And so that just led to more confusion, more frustration. So for me, I just had to keep it hidden. My wife, she never knew anything that was going on. I was able to really keep that hidden. After I finished seminary, ended up going back overseas to Asia. I spent 4 years over there, and kind of like you, Greg, when you were talking about how your addiction just continued to escalate. Like that's what happened to me. It continued to escalate when I was overseas. I ended up also crossing that flesh barrier. Started going to massage parlors and finding other ways of acting out that weren't just pornography and masturbation. And so the shame just continued to pile on, because now here I am serving with this ministry overseas. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing. I'm talking to people and sharing the love of Christ with people. Having little small groups, and this problem just seemed to be getting even worse than it was before. And so I was so afraid of confession. And like I said before, when I was talking about when I was a young kid and I understood that I was forgiven, like I knew that everything that I did, God forgave me. I knew that when God looked at me, he saw Jesus's perfect record and that nothing could change that. But I also felt that God was just in heaven, just looking at me with all this just shame, and was just like, I've given you everything, and this is what you're choosing to do. And that he was so disappointed in me. So
that sounds like it's your disappointment getting projected onto God, right?
Oh yeah.
Which is what happens when we stay in our own heads.
Sure. Yeah. Yes. And so I knew 1 John 1:9 that talked about how my sins were forgiven. But I also knew James 5:15-16, which talk about confessing your sins to each other so that you can be healed. So I knew that I was forgiven, but I also knew that I needed healing. And that was the scary part. Confessing to somebody else what I was struggling with was the scariest thing in the world to me. And so for me, it actually took 2 other people coming to me and confessing their own sexual brokenness while I was overseas that led me finally to just break down and tell one of my friends there that was with me. And that, I can't even describe how freeing that was. And I really thought that his response was going to be, okay, you've told me this, like, what in the world? Like, I can't believe you've done this. And like, what are we going to do to fix this? And I thought that was going to be his response. But actually, he just looked at me and he said, wow, that's a lot to be carrying around on your own. And I literally felt this weight come off my shoulders. And that was really when I started to believe, okay, maybe there's some type of healing that can take place. Maybe there's hope. So I knew coming back home after that 4 years, I knew that this was going to be a huge focus for me. And so I came back to Birmingham. This was 2010. And I found a group of guys that were meeting together. And it ended up being a group that Greg was a part of. And I remember my third meeting, being in a little small group with Greg and sharing my story with him, and just the way that he responded to me. I knew, I was like, okay, this is a guy who understands this. And so we actually went out and had coffee, and
Well, you had coffee. I probably had Diet
That's
Coke.
true. That's true. We met for we met, and I started to hear the story that he already kind of shared earlier, and I realized, wow, like, I'm not alone. And for me, that was the turning point. Yeah.
Yeah. And so in a big fast forward, being back from Asia and thinking about, like, okay, what am I going to do now? You did a couple of different career changes. And then a few years ago, I came to you, I guess about 2.5 years ago now, and said, hey, quick question for you. How'd you feel about quitting your job and coming to work with me? Right?
Yeah. And I'd always thought if I ever got back into, quote, the ministry, it would be either like working for a church or, being a pastor somewhere, especially just like a missions pastor, because that was just kind of where my heart was. But the thing that really grabbed me was when you told me really what the vision for Awaken was, and that's to help people become what they were created to be, and how that's going to fuel people being able to go overseas, and that's going to fuel people to be able to engage their wives and their children and to really make an impact in this world, is being able to be who God created them to be. And that got me really excited. I was like, you know what? Yeah, I don't have to be a pastor to do that. I can help people find healing and freedom and be able to throw off the shame that they feel when they feel like they're sidelined because of their unwanted sexual behaviors.
Yeah.
And allow them to really become who God has called them to be and says they are. And that is really going to allow them to impact their, like I said, their families. They can engage their wives, they can engage their children, they can engage the people around them with full hearts and fully who they are, being fully alive. So yeah, that's really what got me excited to come on staff with Awaken.
Well, and so just for those of you who are listening and just kind of getting to know Awaken and the three of us for the first time, something I'll tell you is that it's pretty easy to focus when the thing that people discover about you when they do a Google search is that you're a sexual addiction and betrayal trauma recovery ministry, is, okay, these people are going to help me stop looking at porn, or these people are going to help me navigate through the PTSD that I'm experiencing from finding out what my husband was doing. And yes, that's right. But a lot of times the way that we think about it, I think, is the way that you were describing, Bobby, with the men's group that you were in, and it being really focused on just how can we help each other change the behavior. And don't get me wrong, I mean, if I'm addicted to a distorted experience with sex, there is definitely behavior that needs to be modified. We're not saying just keep doing what you're doing, but just don't feel bad about it anymore. No, there's definitely behavior that has to be modified. But if that's the only focus, we're just doing a different flavor of what we've been trying to do and not getting to the heart of it. And so, and that is kind of really what has informed our vision as an organization. And that is, like you said, helping people live the lives they were created for. It goes much broader and much deeper than help people stop doing behavior XYZ, or help people get over the pain and the trauma of having been betrayed. I mean, yes, that's the starting point. That's kind of the entry point. But once we've begun to get some stability in our lives, the really good question becomes, how did I get here in the first place, right? And how did I get here? And why has it been so hard for me to experience anything else? And that's where we get back to the whole reason why we've decided to do this podcast, because the unhealthy things that we start to do in order to try to get our needs met, that become addictions for some people, become habits, for some, and full-fledged addictions for others, they are misguided attempts to get a legitimate need met, right? There are things that we really want, and even deeper than that, there are things that we really need. And so, what we're trying to do here is show people a picture of what that could look like. And I think that for me, one thing that was really key in making a light bulb go off, and I think it has been for a lot of other people too, because 10 or 15 million people have seen this TED Talk that Johann Hari did years ago. And Johann Hari is a British author, sociologist, and he did a TED Talk called "Everything You Know About Addiction Is Wrong." And it primarily was focusing on the methodology and kind of the philosophy behind the war on drugs in the UK and the US starting in the 80s, and how we just talked about how bad it is what you're doing, and we kind of vilified the user. And what that ended up doing was driving people who are already living isolated lives even deeper into isolation, when what we really needed to be doing was inviting them into deeper connection. And many people have heard kind of the very last line, which is the zinger from this, but I'm just going to read the last few things that Johann said in his TED Talk. He says, "What I've tried to do now, and I can't tell you I do it consistently, I can't tell you it's easy, is to say to the addicts in my life that I want to deepen the connection with them. To say to them, I love you, whether you're using or not. I love you, whatever state you're in. And if you need me, I'll come and sit with you because I love you. And I don't want you to be alone or to feel alone." And I think the core of that message, you're not alone, we love you, has to be at every level of how we respond to addicts, socially, politically, and individually. For 100 years now, we've been singing war songs about addicts. I think all along we should have been singing love songs to them, because the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. And that the opposite of addiction is connection is something that probably we've all heard. You've probably heard it quoted, but it's so absolutely simple, but it's so absolutely true, right? What we really want, if we were to boil it down to one word, is connection, right? Mm-hmm. And I've noticed in the things that all three of us have shared so far, all of us have talked about how we were getting deeper, deeper, and deeper into unhealthy ways of processing life when we were disconnected, when we were living maybe, and by disconnected, I don't mean that we were physically isolated, because we might have been around other people, but I think sometimes that makes it even worse. Yeah. When we're living disconnected lives relationally, kind of like being lonely in a crowd. Mm-hmm. And so what we want to do with our community of Awaken is to meet with people, men and women, who have experienced that disconnection, and it has led them to do unhealthy things sexually, and has really wrecked a lot of stuff in their lives. And now they've either said, I can't live with this anymore, or they've gotten caught and they're asking for help, and we're helping them not only find better actions and better ways of living, but better ways of finding what they've really wanted all along, and that's connection. So
I wanted to say something.
Yeah, please.
Just thinking about all the things you're talking about, both of y'all sharing your stories of the struggle that you had most of your life. The tough thing for the spouses is when we come into this community or, find out all this has been going on, it's really hard because y'all are finding answers to why you've been struggling, or you're starting to understand, and you have community. Well, and we're just like, it feels to us, and it is in some ways, like this bomb just got put in our laps. We didn't ask for it. We didn't know about it. And so to reconcile, like, there's nothing good about it. It's not like, well, it's good because of what the good that's coming. No, it's bad. It's not good. But God can use it. Mm-hmm. But does that make sense? Like, it's really hard for women to not feel like, one girl said, collateral damage. Like, so your addiction and your not knowing what was going on is now bleeding onto me. And yet, for a while, yes, we're just working through the trauma. But at some point, the women that I know personally and are still in community, so I've gotten to know them and watched their story unfold, when they realize, okay, this happened and it did bleed onto me, but I also was living in ways that weren't healthy for me.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that, like, for me personally, this is not everybody's story, but for me personally, I didn't get it until my world blew up.
Yeah.
Like, God convicted me of things over the years that, looking to you for too much and idolizing you and other people and my goodness. I mean, that was an idol. Me being good and making us a good couple was an idol. And so it took, for me, I think it took this, you falling off the pedestal and all other things to, like, kind of wake me up out of that stupor. And so I can see that now, but I don't want to make women feel like, well, God is doing this for you too.
Yeah.
He does have a plan for us as well, but it's just so hard to navigate. There's no, like, easy answers. I'm not saying your journey is easy, but does that make sense? Like, you've been having the struggle, so you know all the things, and then you're like, oh.
Yeah.
And that for us, doesn't come for a long time.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
When you've got spouses who are walking through this together, one is the struggler and one is the betrayed partner, you're in parallel lanes, but you're not necessarily, the cars aren't right next to each other. And I think that there's another reason why a focus on finding healthy connection, which is what we really want, is so important, because there's no guarantee that if you're married, that based on the elements of your story, that you're going to stay married.
Right.
There's also the importance of realizing that being married isn't the fix-all. It's not the only connection that you need. And some marriages struggle because I think that partners are looking to get all of their connection needs met from each other. And that's not how it was ever supposed to be. And so, because some people who are listening to this are single and will never be married, and some are single and will be married, and some are married and will be single, and some are married and will stay married. I mean, we've got to broaden our picture of what healthy connection can look like. And I think that that's one of the things that I'm really excited about doing. So, what is this? What's this podcast going to be? Well, it's going to be one conversation after another that gives us a picture of what healthy connection could look like. Bobby, I know that you've, just like me, probably heard in 20 sermons or more the illustration about how to spot a counterfeit. And like when somebody goes to work at a bank, if they want to teach them how to spot a counterfeit, what do? They have them work with real money.
Oh, right,
all day long,
right. Yeah,
because what happens when you spend all your time around the real thing?
Yeah, well, then you get to know it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you get to know the real thing, it's much easier to spot the counterfeit. And so when we're talking about addiction recovery, and not only recovering from addiction, so, okay, pause. Awaken is a sexual addiction, brokenness, betrayal, trauma organization. And so, yeah, that's where we're having a lot of our specific conversations. But if your addictive struggle is with something else, I know you're already hearing things today that you can relate to. If you're not an addict, but if you just struggle to relate healthily, if you find yourself really looking to have control in relationships, or having those kind of codependent dynamics, this is something that's much bigger and broader than addiction. There are counterfeit ways that we seek to have our connection needs met all the time. Mm-hmm. And so instead of just letting this be a podcast about how to quit looking at porn, how to quit trying to control your husband, how to quit, X, Y, Z, it's going to be, we want to talk about and with people who have experienced beautiful, healthy connection. And I even, have thought about not all, but many of the different ways that healthy connection shows up. And so some of these conversations are going to be centered around the concept of authenticity, right? And showing up as our real self rather than wearing a mask. Some of them are going to talk about just examples of real, healthy friendship and the benefit that we get from that, about interdependence, about vulnerability, encouragement, empathy, advocacy. That is a form of connection when we stand up and protect other people. Honesty, confession, self-awareness, taking agency or, ownership over our lives, trust of God, trust of other people. All of those are different experiences of connection. And so I'm just really excited to think about that and to hear lots of people who we deeply respect give us their perspectives on that and their stories about that. So as we get ready to kind of wrap this conversation up and then look to subsequent episodes to start having these other conversations, I just love to ask you guys kind of, what are you excited about? What are you hopeful that you're going to hear, that people in our community, that people who listen to this podcast are going to hear and realize, this is something that's possible, and it's not just possible for other people, it's possible for me. What kind of gets you excited about this?
Yeah, I was struck when just a second ago when you were talking about how our spouses were not meant to meet all of our needs, and that was really impactful for me when I realized that I had really pulled back from a lot of my relationships with other men, and was putting all that hope in my wife, and I'd sexualized it too. So for me, when sex and marriage had kind of become frustrating, and there were issues, then I was like, well, what's wrong? What's this isn't working. The marriage is not what it's supposed to be. And so really kind of coming to an understanding how, I was meant for relationship. And like you said, there's so many different people listening to this podcast. Some are married, some are single. And the first thing that God says in the Bible that's not good is that man should not be alone. And so we're meant for connection. And so I'm excited just to be able to hear in this podcast just from different people and their experiences with that, and to help all you that are listening to be able to know that there is hope for that. And you can have a deep intimate relationship whether you're married or not, and you can have that with your spouse, but you can also have that just with your friends. And that's, for me, that was really important. Like I said before, just to realize God has put these other men in my life to allow me to have a deep relationship with them, and it doesn't all just have to fall on my wife.
That's good. I was thinking about the context that I work in with the women on that side of, the story, and the connection there. The women who have been coming to our group for years that I'm now, I would say they're my best of friends. We enjoy things outside of just having the group together. We enjoy a lot of things together. But I was also thinking about our church community group, where that is a very different context, and we're not there to work Awaken, which is refreshing.
Yeah.
But I think about like not many times, there have been a few times where I have been a little not happy with Greg. And so we go to community group, and the leader will start with, let's just do a little check-in of how we all are. And I'm like, oh, great. But I'm honest about like, well, I'm actually kind of mad at Greg right now. And I don't get into the whole thing, and I'm not just, ugly or anything. And then through the course of the evening, we eat together, we, discuss whatever we're talking about, and we pray. And I'm almost like not even mad by the end of the evening, because I've brought people into it and I don't feel alone. And so that's a different context, but that's connection. And so I think learning to have, you don't have to be that open with a ton of people, but to have a few where even when you're not okay with your spouse, you can share that with those people. It's been life-changing for me. Because most of my experience with that type of connection was in the recovery community, which makes sense. But then to have that in another context where it's not all about addiction and betrayal trauma is also life-giving. So I appreciate both.
Yeah.
And I would love for other people to experience that type of connection, even if it's not going through betrayal trauma.
Yeah. And I think that's important. And I'll take that as a catalyst to just invite you, listener, to think about the people in your life who would want to be a part of these conversations about connection. Not just the people in your life that you know of who maybe are struggling sexually, because like I said, that's why that's behind a lot of what Awaken does. But that's not certainly a limited audience to who's going to benefit from these conversations. Anybody who's looking to deepen healthy connections, experiences with healthy intimacy and relationships. Connection and intimacy are really synonymous, although intimacy is so often, unfortunately, used more as a synonym for sex than it is for connection. And I think we misunderstand intimacy when we do that, because intimacy is something I can have with a ton of people. I only have one kind of intimacy. There's one type of intimacy that I only have with Stacey, and that's sexual intimacy. But there's so many other kinds. And so, who is exempt from benefiting from hearing about healthy connection? I mean, it's exactly nobody. So we'd really ask for your help in spreading the word. If you find these conversations helpful, we would appreciate you, doing all the things you do with a podcast. Give it a 5-star review, and share about it, and just all those good things. I don't even know exactly what to ask for, because I'm such a novice and a rookie at this. But and keep coming back.
Subscribe and hit the like button.
Yeah,
smash the like button. That's what they always say now. Smash.
Yeah, we're all too old to say things like that. We're way, way, way too old. But yeah, this is going to be a really fun. This is going to be a fun trip to see where these conversations go. Every couple of weeks, we'll encourage you to come back for a new conversation. And if you want to check out more about what Awaken is doing, we would encourage you to go to our website. It's awakenrecovery.com, awakenrecovery.com. And like I said earlier, we're based in Birmingham, but we have offerings and ways to connect to our community for you no matter where you live. We have weekly meetings for men and women in recovery that are virtual, and for women who are seeking betrayal trauma support that's virtual. We also have workshops for women and intensives for men who want to go deeper into the therapeutic and spiritual work that is a part of healing. And you can read all about that stuff on our website, awakenrecovery.com. We would love to hear from you. And so you can go to the contact section of the website, fill out a form. We'd love to know that you're listening. And thanks for going on this journey with us. We're excited to talk more and more about what we really want. So thanks for listening, and we will see you next time.